Your voice is your weapon, Part 2. When I got home, I practiced speaking to myself in the mirror. I had tried to do so in the past, but I had ended up thinking that I looked stupid. But I found that it was not as bad to talk to myself. I noticed the subtle things I did which showed that I was nervous and corrected myself. I was so excited when I could say the introduction of the presentation without stammering or losing my train of thought. I called Darius. Goes what? I can say it without fidgeting and making any mistakes. I usually end up reading my notes to myself whenever I practice alone. I was so giddy I could not explain it. That is fantastic. Keep on practicing. Why are you awake at this time anyway? He asked me. Not sleep. Hey, I wanted to ask something, I said. Feel free to, he encouraged me. Well, I wanted to know how you say what you mean, I said. I do not understand what you mean. In class, you always say what's on your mind. You're never afraid of being laughed at or the teacher getting mad. How do you do that? I asked. Oh, I see what you mean. Well, it's natural. I do not know how I do it. I would suggest that you ask them any questions you have after class. Remember, no question is too stupid, he told me. He was so smart and confident. I did not get why people just assumed that he was a know-it-all. Well, I had been one of those people before I got to know him. Thank you, Darius. See you tomorrow, I said. See you. Good night, he said. Somehow speaking to him made me feel less anxious and assured myself. I promised myself that I was going to speak to my coach about the strategy and ask Eve out before the end of the month. I was tired of being too nervous to do anything and then beating myself up over it later on. I cleared my mind of all my thoughts and fell into a deep slumber. When I woke up, my aunt was knocking on my door. I checked my alarm only to discover that I had woken up late. Somehow I had not heard my alarm and now I was going to be late. Hopefully I would not end up getting detention. I jumped out of my bed, told my aunt that I was awake, had a quick shower. It was either shower or breakfast, and I chose to freshen up, then eat later on. Come on, I can drop you off on my way to work, she said once I had finished getting ready. You're a lifesaver, I exclaimed in relief. So what did your father want the other night? She asked. The usual, trying to force me into something I am not. I do not think it has gotten through to him yet that I do not want to take over the company one day, I said. Your father has always been ambitious when he was growing up. When he married your mother, who was the gentlest soul, he changed a bit, but not for long. Not after he found out about her ailment. His heart hardened, she sighed. He treated her as less than human. Do not make silly excuses for him. He has always been cold and calculating. He used her as a baby popping machine, then when she was not strong enough anymore, he left her to die. I gritted my teeth. I was beginning to get emotional when I thought of my mother, who passed on when I was 7 years old, which was the time I stopped speaking. It would take several years and speech therapy sessions to get me to be normal again. Elton, being my older brother, did all he could to make my father happy, but when he was about to go to college, he was diagnosed with depression. But my father kept on putting pressure on him until he took his own life. I had lost two of the closest people in my life because of my father. I did not want to be excellent in his eyes. I wanted him to let me be. However, I could only say so much to him without getting upset. When he got upset, it was ugly. He's a deeply flawed man, but he loves you in his own misguided way, she said. You only say that because he is your brother. Maybe. Well, you better get going now. You have a minute left, she said. Goodbye, I hugged her. She was the only light in my life. She had raised me as if I was her child. It was her who protected the peace in the house. If she was not there, I would have left that man to his devices many years ago. I just got to class as the final bell rang and settled into my seat. I waved to Darius, but he stared at me with stone-cold expression. I was surprised since I usually got some form of acknowledgement from him when I greeted him. I figured he was having a bad day, so I let him be. During class, he did not raise his hand even once. The only time he spoke was when he was called upon by our teacher. When class was dismissed, I rushed over to him and grabbed his arm. He hissed and stared at me with a pained look. Are you okay? I asked him. Leave me, he said through gritted teeth. I gave him an apologetic look. I was unaware that my grip was that strong. Tonight, my place, he said. Then he turned to leave. Dude, you still not have asked Eve out yet? Gary said beside me. I will after our game in a few days, I promised. You better. Josh has his eye on her. She's a nice girl and seems to like you a lot, he told me. A bit later on, we had football practice. It went fairly well, and after practice, I stayed behind to speak to the coach. Hey, Daniel. Nice work today. How can I help you? He asked. My palms started sweating and my heart started to pound in my chest. Hi, yes, I wanted to speak to you about something, I said. Sure, is everything okay? I was looking at the strategies for the game in a few days. I noticed something that I did not understand and I wanted to ask you about that, I said. Okay, let me just fetch my file on the bench and we can go over it, he said. He took his file and handed it to me. I started to explain to him the error that I had noticed on the strategy. He gave me an encouraging nod, which helped me to relax a bit more. Oh, I see what you mean. I'm getting quite old and my mind's not so sharp anymore. It is a good thing that I have intelligent people like you on my team then, he smiled. I sighed. I had expected him to reprimand me for correcting him. Thank you, coach. I just thought I should say something, I said. I've been watching you. You're one of our very good players. I'm looking forward to seeing how you perform in the game in a few days. He patted me on the back. The coach's compliment had me glowing for the rest of the day. I had always remained silent during team discussions and let the others take the lead. Even when I tried to speak up, the others' voices drowned mine out. What had just happened had made me more confident about asking Eve out. I texted her and I asked her to go out with me after the game. I did not get an immediate response, but I was sure that it was going to be a positive response. Later on, when I saw Darius, he was much less cheerful than usual. He was not cheerful normally, but on that day, it was even worse. He snapped at me several times when I got something wrong, which was pretty rare for him. I took a chance and confronted him. What is up with you? I asked him. What are you talking about? He avoided my gaze. You're very grumpy. You're acting weird in school today, and you keep on watching while holding your arm. Did you get hurt? I asked him, taking a step closer to me. His eyes darted back and forth, but he refused to even look at me. Tell me what's going on. Sometimes talking about it helps, I said gently. His eyes started to fill up with tears. It's so difficult to stay strong, Daniel. I'm tired, he sobbed. I took his hand and led him to his bed. I brought him closer to me and waited for him to calm down a bit. I did not have any experience in how to talk with someone in clear emotional distress. He had always been so strong. What could have happened? What is wrong, Darius? Let me know, please, I said. Do not worry about me. It's just a bad time for me. Sometimes it all gets too much for me and I have to release it, he said weakly. What gets too much? Living. Putting on this mask so they do not go after my weaknesses, he said. You keep on speaking about putting up a facade. Is there someone who's troubling you? I asked him. Freshman year, I had bullies. They were seniors. I was so scrawny and a nerd, a perfect target for him. I started cutting because of how the whole thing affected me. I pretended to be emotionless. Worked hard and slowly, no one bothered me anymore, he said. Now that I thought about it, he had not been as scary in our first year, but I never paid attention to him until now. Why, did you cut yourself last night? I asked. I keep everything bottled up, the good and the bad. It gets so loud and lonely in my mind sometimes, he shrugged. Should go out more, I said. You do, but you're still shy, he raised an eyebrow. Well, that is my problem. No, I mean that you should do something fun, to get your mind off things. Hey, I got an idea. You want to come to my football game in a few days? I asked. It was just on a whim, and I knew that it was not his usual scene. He actually smiled and chuckled a bit when I said that. You do know that I'm not into sports, right? He laughed. He looked less strained now, which made me happier. I know, but you might like it. Who knows? Only my aunt will make it to the game, and she's always shouting encouraging stuff to me when I'm on the field. Very embarrassing. It would be nice if I had another familiar face there for me. But honestly, it's absolutely up to you, I shrugged. Okay. Only because I've never been to one. Maybe I can sit with your aunt and keep her busy enough to not embarrass you. He shrugged. I cannot help it. I hugged him. It was purely on instinct, and as soon as I did so, he stiffened. I made to pull away, but he suddenly tightened his grip on me. Thank you for trying to make me feel better. No one has ever noticed before, he said. That is what friends are for, right? I beamed when we pulled apart. Thanks, friend? He said the word in a weird tone as if he was testing it out. I wish that he would let everyone else see what a good person he was, but I had a feeling that in time he would. The night of the football game came, and I was so nervous. Not only did I want to show the coach that I was a capable player, but I was also going to ask Eve to be my girlfriend later that night. But she was just an afterthought, because all I could think about was whether Darius was going to enjoy the game or not. Over the past few days, we had taken a break from working on the presentation after I insisted he never took any break from working. So I had to force him to at least leave the presentation for a few days. I invited him over to my house after school and we would play video games. He was a very quick learner, and soon enough, he was giving me a run for his money. When we were together, I could say whatever was on my mind without worrying and sounding silly. We would talk about both meaningful and meaningless things for hours. It was just so much easier to be with him. It helped that he and my aunt got along like a house on fire. Gary joined us a few times, but they were a little awkward around each other, which was to be expected. Gary actually talked to me about the amount of time that I spent with Darius compared to him and the others. Look, don't you think you're becoming too friendly with him? Do not forget that he is a social pariah. You should be using this time to get to know Eve. You would swear that you were courting a lady during the Middle Ages, he rolled his eyes. But the thing was, I was not so sure that I liked Eve as much as I should have. I just did not see her as someone I could love like the books my aunt used to read to me. Either way, I had to go through with asking her out. I could not cancel our date after the game. I did not want to seem like a jerk by canceling our date. When we came onto the field, there was loud screaming from the audience. I heard my name being called, and when I looked, my aunt and Darius were waving at me. A flush of determination went through me. I was on the field, where I did what I loved. I was ready. The opposition was a tough team, but we held our own until the very end. There were a few seconds left on the clock, and what happened next was going to determine who the victors were. I kept my eye on the ball and waited for the right moment to strike. Then I had it. I ran across the field and scored a touchdown. The crowd erupted into a deafening cheer. My teammates were upon me and carrying me around within seconds. I could not believe it. We won because of me. That had never happened before, but I guess I had my lucky stars to thank. After what seemed like hours of people congratulating our team and taking pictures with us, I finally got away. So proud of you, kiddo. My aunt brought me in for a hug. You were brilliant out there. I'm so proud of you, Darius beamed. Thank you both. I would not have made it without your support. Aunt, did he come? I asked her, referring to my dad, but I already knew the answer. He never showed up, even after putting so much pressure on me to be the best. He always flaked out on me. No, she sighed. I nodded. I have something for you. I wanted to give it to you before the game, but I could not find you, Darius said as he tugged me towards the parking lot to his car. Get in, he said. I complied. It was nothing much, but I wanted to show you my support, he said as he handed me a wristband. Printed on it were the words, "You will always be a winner." Wow, you're too kind. I cannot thank you enough, I smiled. I just wanted to do something for you. You've done so much for me already, he smiled. Thank you. Just your presence makes me happy. I believe that you are my lucky charm. I've never had such a good game before. I guess you have to keep me close then, he whispered. As he leaned closer to me, I felt a tug towards him, which was stronger that night than it had been in the past. I could not help being pulled into him, no matter how hard I had been resisting for the past few days. I gave in and I brushed my lips against his. I felt a slight spark and the desire for more. He leaned in closer and kissed me properly. His kiss was urgent, passionate, and all that I wanted. Every second that passed with his lips on mine intensified the feeling in my heart. I feared that I was about to combust from the urgent desire that he had ignited in me. This was what I had been longing for. It was so much better than the stories, but more fleeting than the tragic romances of the past. We were interrupted by a loud ping. We both checked our phones for notifications. We were so close to each other that we could see into each other's phones. The first thing that I saw was a message. Eve. Hey, just confirming that we're still on for tonight? I'm waiting for you by your locker. Oh no. I had forgotten about Eve. I had a sinking feeling in my stomach when I looked beside me. His eyes had frozen over, which meant that he had read what Eve sent. Well, let me not keep you from your date then, he scoffed. To be continued. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.